Good morning, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. Today I'm going to be talking about disinformation in the age of information. And, apologies in advance if my countenance looks very fatigued. I didn't get much sleep last night, so I'm probably going to be a little bit unhinged just because when you don't get good sleep, it definitely affects your mind. And I don't really know what prompted me to do a video while sleep deprived. Normally, when I'm sleep deprived, I want to do the opposite because it takes a lot of energy to even do this kind of thing, I find. So if I'm sleep deprived, I kind of don't really want to do it. But anyway, I'm going to do it anyway because I feel like it. And that's to talk about, disinformation. And pretty much everyone I see is misinformed on like everything, including myself. I think everyone in the world, regardless of how educated you are or how smart you think you are, you're not getting the full picture of information. And the reason you're not getting the full picture is specifically because of social media algorithms, news algorithms, and your preferences to political leanings that these algorithms entice you to fall under. And I think everyone kind of notices this. Like you watch one video, like let's say, I don't know, there's like a Jordan Peterson video or just, some other famous YouTuber celebrity that you're not really that interested in, but you see the video and you're like, it catches your interest and you're like, all right, I'll watch this. And then all of a sudden your feed is just filled with political, like whatever that political video or whatever that video you watch is just filled with that branch of content, right? So this happens especially with the whole COVID thing going on. People are basically getting a lot of misinformation from both sides. I know that's kind of like a meme at this point. It's like, oh, it's both sides' fault, and it is. And but the problems come from many different places. And this is the aspect of disinformation that people are really not challenging. And part of that is the fact that most people are ignorant to understanding how things function, right? A lot of these things, specifically with science and medicine, is specifically designed to be very esoteric. It's specifically designed to have a very limited amount of doctors within the system so they get more money. That's a completely different issue. But when this is an issue, it creates a very, very niche market or group of people that are the only people that are allowed to discuss these things. And that circle becomes even smaller once you get into specialization, right? And you have very specialized people, which there aren't really many people that have access to these things unless they're watching them on the internet. And these people have, a blue tick and they're kind of immersed within the mainstream media narrative. And it doesn't mean that they are necessarily lying, but it means that whatever you're hearing from them is going to be distorted based off of their political leanings. And again, this goes for conservative views and as well as liberal, leftist, socialist, whatever that the left, I don't know. I don't really like categorizing these things anymore because it just doesn't really make sense. Really, like what being conservative versus liberal is just like when you actually look at what those words actually mean in a literal sense. Like both sides don't exhibit either of them, if that makes sense. And it's just kind of weird that we segregate these two groups when they don't even really align with their own word. Again, another topic, but it just proves the point of how much misinformation we have where we're part of these subgroups, sub-identities that don't really exist. And it's a huge problem when you're trying to get real information because there's always going to be this distortion effect from their political affiliation groups, right? And so this is where you have to take power into your own hands, which has been sort of taken away from us. We've sort of relied off the expertise of people on the internet or on the news or on the TV to sort of dictate how we understand information, and a lot of people's opinions are really just reflections of other people's opinions. And then when you go back to that person, their opinion is based off of some other expert's opinion, some other scientist that's not necessarily speaking on in the present moment, whatever the media you're consuming it is under. And then that scientist is discussing something from some study that is in response maybe to another study before that. So you have this broken telephone effect that's going on, and this is very much exacerbated on the internet because, back in the day, if you wanted to find information, the only place was through the news, or you knew someone directly, or you went to the library, or you actually had to do like real research, right? And no one really took the news that seriously. I mean, it was there to gather data and information, but everyone kind of knew that it was just media frenzy. That was kind of like the whole thing, and it wasn't based in a left or right thing. I'm talking like in the 1950s and before. It was very much just like, oh, the media is always going to exacerbate things, and the only other option would be to go to your local library, go to the university, and actually do your own research and gather your own articles of information and data, which no one really does anymore because we have the internet. And the problem with the internet is now you just Google something and you're already getting a distorted feedback loop, because now you're not getting the raw data unless you specifically search for the raw data and you know how to look for it, which a lot of people don't, unfortunately. And there are ways to do that through Google if you just have a process of, basically having to continue forward. It's like when you read a Wikipedia article, right? And then you see a citation, you have to go to the citation and see the sources, and then you have to backtrack from the sources with other sources and see where the discrepancies are. And that's where, when you're looking at these experts, or not even experts, a lot of people just share videos from like either news anchors or just podcasters, people like me. I'm not going to make videos necessarily on COVID or vaccines or my own opinions, because I don't want to feed into that feedback cycle of just consuming content made from like a very segregated dynamic, right? I want to encourage people to look further into where their information is coming from, and to look beyond just what the person is telling you, and to actually do your own research, which a lot of people don't really do. They don't really take the step to, after seeing a video on something, to like actually go and read those studies that the person is mentioning, or to see this interview or this whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to do your own due diligence. And if you want to live in this age of information, and you want to be responsible in the sense of being able to have access to actual information, you have to constantly back check yourself, because it's very easy to fall into an ideological trap, especially when it comes to news and gathering information, because a lot of people fall into belief systems, and then the algorithm just reflects that like on acid, and then all you're getting is this distorted feed of information that's not really giving you the full picture. And that's really the whole point of having as much information and living in the information age, is to have a complete picture of everything that you're trying to learn about. And right now the algorithm isn't geared towards giving you the full picture, it's geared towards giving you a segmented one, because everything's in a niche. That's how the algorithm is programmed. Everything's divided up into genres and pockets and little segments of understanding, and that's where it'll put you, unless you do the work yourself to say, no, I'm going to see the other side of this perspective and get other data, get other relevant opinions and information from, like, let's say with the science, is getting actual doctors or actual experts, which is really hard to find because those are very esoteric jobs. And when I say esoteric, I mean it's not built for public understanding, right? It's not geared towards people to understand it in a way so that they have to rely off of a buffer, which is a doctor or a medical professional, to explain to them what they know that you don't. And this applies to every facet of basically the entire Western civilization. We're talking about finance, law, everything, except the difference between medicine and finance and law is that the medical industry is very much intentionally geared to have as limited amount of people within that industry as possible so that they make as much money as possible. That's how it's designed. That's how it's built. And you have to take that into consideration when you're gathering information. And this is where the political affiliations come in, because who is paying these people? Why are they paying them? Is there a political intention behind what they're paying them? Because you can be a doctor, have as much expertise as you can, and you can be a very established person and have very real good credentials and a real solid track record, and all a person has to do is give them what, $3 million, which is really nothing in these mainstream media giants. They just give you that, probably even more, and you promote whatever that they want you to say, whatever is the political interest, so long as it follows within the technical guidelines of what they're trying to express to you. And this could come from people who are anti-vax or pro-vax. It's really hard to say, because what is the ulterior motive here? And how do you know what the ulterior motive is? This is where conspiracy theories start coming up. And it's obvious that conspiracy theories are mostly bullshit because they're made up. They're not, it's not real. What is real is the very likelihood that what information you are getting from a mainstream media perspective is very much distorted and leaning towards a political agenda that people should be aware of, regardless of what news you watch or how well established you think it is. You need to realize that even though, yes, they're not technically lying to you, this is same with like Fox News or CNN, they're not lying to you. They can't technically lie to you, but what they can do is not say anything, right? They can only give you a certain segment of information, or specific studies, which when we're talking about studies, you need to look at multiple studies. First of all, you can't just rely off of one study. You should look at a wide variety of studies, see which ones are maybe affiliated with political groups or political ideologies, and see maybe if there are some biases to be aware of, which there are a lot of. You should be aware of it, and if you aren't aware of it, that's a huge problem for you and for everyone else around you. And you should also just learn about, this is what I did throughout all of 2020, was learned about virology, learn about immunology, learn about all of this stuff, learn about how these vaccines work to a very proficient level, definitely not as an expert, but enough for me to make a decision for myself, right? Which I won't say because it's irrelevant. This isn't the point of this video, isn't to... Because you know what, I respect what people choose to do and what they choose to believe, because everyone's misinformed. No one really knows what the real truth is. I don't care how educated you think you are. You don't know what's happening behind these closed doors, right? You look at people like Jeffrey Epstein. No one knew what was going on with that. And then it comes to surface, and then everyone's all of a sudden hopping onto it. And you can't deny the fact that there's probably a lot more people like this in the entirety of whatever this political narrative is. And they can have all kinds of different ideas of what they want to do. We don't really know that, and this is why people should avoid conspiracy theories, because it utilizes belief and then utilizes data to confirm those beliefs. You don't want to utilize data to confirm your beliefs. You want to utilize data to construct your beliefs. You want to constantly look at data and constantly question. Anytime you have a set belief in something, you should be looking for another way to challenge that belief. And if you aren't doing that, you aren't learning, you aren't developing constructive arguments, or not conducting anything that is inherently productive for yourself. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about relative to this subject. I think people should really question a lot, basically. It's pretty simple, and realize that a lot of this age of disinformation why everyone thinks everyone's an idiot, is because people just aren't aware that they're getting distorted information, no matter what. Like you're just, it's like being a historian. If you're learning as a real historian and going through countless documents to discover the truth, you have to discern and compare all kinds of different notes and all kinds of different artifacts, all kinds of different accounts, because people make shit up in those accounts. And it's the same thing with whatever's going on right now. People will just make shit up for their own selfish intentions, right? And I've seen it everywhere. I don't care what political thing you are a part of, or how you think you're morally correct for being a part of said ideology. There's always going to be a distortion. There's always going to be a problem with it in the context of it being a separation of truth, or a segmentation of it rather. And I think people should be really aware of that. And this isn't about being like a centrist or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what that word means anymore. I don't know what any of these words mean, because they're kind of pointless. They're just pointless labels we attach to things that we don't like. And this is what and people like want to insist upon having a group or a community, because they're just insecure with themselves, and they feel like being part of a group will give them strength or power. So they attach themselves to these ideologies and confirm their biases with data that's geared towards this. And yeah, they just become attached to these beliefs they have without challenging them, without looking at a different perspective. And you have to really be tough with it, because you need to see a point of view that might really just offend you as a person. Like, I'm Jewish, so I'm very well familiar with the Holocaust, and I've learned the entire Holocaust through the perspective of the Jewish experience through Holocaust survivors. One thing I didn't learn was the Holocaust from the perspective of the Nazis and how the Nazis did things. And this is why most Jews have read Mein Kampf and own it sometimes, because it's important to understand where this comes from, where this originates from. You have to see the whole picture, even the people you don't like, you dislike. And are you prepared to look at the people you dislike, the people who you've villainized as being completely evil? Are you prepared to look at those people and see potential truths in what they might have said in a specific context? And a lot of people aren't ready to do that. They don't want to admit when they are wrong, or when someone they don't like is right. And you have to just let go of that, because all you're doing is setting yourself up to be misinformed consistently. And I see this all the time, because people are so triggered emotionally by everything, and all it does is it makes them less informed, more biased, and just more resentful towards people in a way that is not healthy. And I'm subject to this as well. I noticed this becoming more prominent, of me trying to villainize other people who I might not agree with. And you have to take a step back and realize that these people aren't opinions. These people aren't the opinions that they represent or pretend to represent. That's not who they are. That's just an acquired self that they've put on, basically a mask to try to figure out how this world works, which we don't ever really know. We haven't figured it out yet. Like, there's still a lot of problems in the world, and sometimes it gets worse, sometimes it gets better, and that's part of the human experience and experiment to create a perfect utopian society, which inevitably we haven't figured out yet. And all people seem to want to do is fixate on ideas and concepts that they don't know if they work or not. They don't know if it's the truth or not, but they attach themselves to it anyway because they have nothing else. And are you prepared to just accept everything in the world, every opinion, every fact, every idea or ideal society that people want, and just accepting that as being an imperfect state, because none of these ideas have ever worked before, and none of them are working currently, and no one wants to admit that. Everyone wants to be right, And the only way, this is science, the only way to succeed in science is to be wrong all the time. That's how science works. That's why science is so good, because it's experimental. And refusing to acknowledge science as an experiment goes against the complete notion of science. Science is an experiment, and it always will be an experiment, because you never know. There's no such thing as perfection necessarily. You're always constantly improving and trying to get to the most efficient state of what you're trying to accomplish. And that is the process of science. And choosing to have a belief before the science is even completed is just idiocy. Whether you're pro or anti whatever, unless you actually see the results and see what happens, you don't know anything. And this is an extended problem with other issues that I'm not going to get into. But as time goes on, and as governments become more involved in science and try to invoke forced aspects and trying to get people to inherently believe in something that has nothing to do with belief, it becomes religious. It's a religion that you're following at this point. A religion that is constructed from a very esoteric niche market or niche works environment that no one really has access to. The only time this has ever happened before in history was when the Catholic Church was invented. And I don't think I need to explain why this is problematic. And I think this is the main reason why, when the United States was created, a true country under God, a free nation, there was a separation of church and state. How can you have a separation of church and state and have a nation under God? It doesn't make sense. It actually makes perfect sense, because there is no political entity that can control religion or spirituality, because spirituality, first of all, is very personal, as well as communal, of course, but it is very personal, and you can't force people to engage in a system that is experimental. Religion is kind of experimental in a way. It's an experiment to become closer to God or closer to enlightenment. And that's why you have tons of different sects in religion, because they're experimenting with different ideas and concepts and interpretations to try to get to that level. And this is why you have a separation of church and state, is so those experiments, the real science behind spirituality and religion, can come forth, and people can have discussions from a very impractical, unbiased fashion without this political injection fueling it. So this is my stance on science, is that science, like religion, should be separate from state. And that's very clear. Anytime a government has involved itself in science, it hasn't gone over well. The perfect example is from nuclear weapons, that originally scientists wanted to create efficient energy sources that didn't rely off coal and oil. And when the government got involved, they just changed that to become a weapon of mass destruction. So historically, we've seen the same things applied to science as governments in the past applied to religion and spirituality. And this is the kind of thing that needs to be emphasized as we move forward. And I think historically, we're going to look back on this era with a lot of scrutiny and shame. I will say that from both sides, whatever. And people should be just skeptical. I don't think you need to attach a belief onto anything, but just question things. I don't understand why that's so complicated for some people to just not fixate on an ideology, because they're just afraid of being wrong. And you just can't function as a human who wants progress and be afraid of being wrong, because that's the whole process. If you're wrong, that's one step closer to being right. And if you can't acknowledge when you have been wrong, which a lot of people don't do, a lot of people in higher positions do not want to do that. They don't want to admit when they are wrong, or when they have done something that contributed to something that was problematic. They don't want to take accountability. No one ever takes accountability for anything in this system that we have. And all they can do is put out misinformation or sometimes just lies, and then if they're proven wrong, they just take away the article and they don't say anything. They don't apologize. They don't even mention it. It's just like, oh, oops, made a mistake. Published literal fake news. And it's just like you should just be aware of that and just not fixate on political ideologies or political affiliations, and just think for yourself. I mean, it's pretty simple. I don't know why I needed to talk about this for, close to 30 minutes here. So I'll leave it at that. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Peace.